Hello, everybody. My name is Parola Kristensson, and I'm the session chair for this session on handwriting, controller, and menus 1, text entry. The first paper is a video presentation, and the title is Analysis and Design of Efficient Authentication Techniques for Password Entry with the QWERTY Keyboard for VR Environments. And it's by Tingjie Wang, Liangyuting Zhang, Yunxin Chu, Zixuan Go, BoYu Gao, and Hai-Ning Liang, who is in the audience here. And I can notice in the program that it's been nominated for a Best Paper Award, so well done. So it should be a very interesting conversation. And with that, let's start playing the video. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Tingjie. I'm glad to present our work, Analyze and Design of Efficient Authentication Techniques for Password Enter with the QWERTY Keyboard for VR environment. Authentication is a key part of keeping our digital life secure, and text-based passwords has been a mainstay for years. Even though new methods like graphic password and biometrics are becoming popular, text passwords still play an important role, especially when other methods feel are unavailable. VR presents unique security challenges as the digital world is isolated from the real world. Unlike traditional setup, VR keyboards are not visible to onlookers, and while cameras, microphones, and GPS are known privacy concerns, there are also less known sensors such as accelerometers and gyroscopes that pose privacy risks and often do not get the same level of protection. So even if capturing video footage of someone typing a password in VR is difficult, other sensors, such as those in VR controllers, can still compromise security by capturing data about users' movements. Different platforms have different password rules, so sticking to the familiar QWERTY layout in VR is necessary. To prevent truth-stuffing attacks, traditional method is random keys position, but this method disrupts the familiar QWERTY setup and making typing slower and less comfortable. This trade-off between security and ease of use is a common issue, especially in VR, where typing is already slower than in the real world. Previous studies show that non-QWERTY layouts make typing even slower than the QWERTY layout. The fundamental principle of truth-stuffing attacks is getting the user input by capturing the movement of the input tool and aligning the keyboard layout. Virtual keyboards on touchscreen, such as smartphones, are limited by their screen size, allowing only random keyboard layouts to counteract the alignment between layout and input action. In expensive VR environments, there is great flexibility, presenting an opportunity to explore alternative methods to defend the alignment of truth-stuffing attacks without compromising the structure of the QWERTY layout. The virtual keyboard system comprises two main parts, the keyboard and the cursor. The keys on the keyboard are spaced apart. To keep security, we consider altering the three crucial positions: the position of the entry keyboard, the position of the cursor, and the position of the keys. The altering enter-keyboard position strategy ensures security by randomly shifting the keyboard position after each key selection. The altering cursor position strategy adjusts the cursor position on the keyboard instead of moving the keyboard itself. To keeping the quarter layout, the key spacing strategy changes the spacing between the keys instead of the key's position. Then we came up 3 research questions to guide the user study about the evaluation of the 3 proposed strategies. Could altering the positions related to the virtual quarter keyboard through 3 strategies effectively mitigate or prevent short-suffering attackers, thereby ensuring the security of password entry? Does the strategies of keyboard-related position alteration, which demonstrated effectiveness in the analysis, apply to both text entry methods? Could the keyboard modification strategies prove effective in defining short-suffering attacks, either to improve the typing performance and user experience compared to a random layout keyboard? We utilized the nav-based machine learning method for our analysis. We random adjust the variation of keyboard cursor position and key space within a predefined range, and recording all key positions on the keyboard at each variation. For this, we employed the nav-based algorithm to create a predictive model. Under the consideration of the results of the theoretical study and the occupied area size, we set the movement intervals for keyboard position and circle position as a range from -4 to 4 in the horizontal direction and from -3 to 3 in vertical direction, and variation intervals for keyboard space as the range from 0 to 2 in both horizontal and vertical directions. Then we used the 2 text entry method to evaluate the 3 keyboard-related position strategies practically. We recorded motion data of controller every time when the key was selected, capturing angle, position, and the distance between the keyboard and controller. Use the algorithms from previous research. We estimated the 3D cursor's position and adjusted the 2D keyboard layout. We used a tree-based backward inference algorithm to infer typing content. To assess the efficiency and influence of the 3 strategies on both QWERTY and typing efficiency, we established 2 baselines: a standard keyboard layout and a random keyboard layout. In user study, we defined the identical character ratio to assess the performance in protecting input content. Identical character ratio measures how many characters match between 2 strings based on their position. To assess the performance of typing, we calculate the entry rate, error rate, usability, and workload. We also collected the user's feedback by a ranking question and an interview. According to the results from the user study, we found when used the ring-based text entry method, keyboard position, key space, and cursor position strategies are effective in resisting short-suffering attacks. As for text entry performance, keyboard position and key space consistently outperforms the random keyboard with higher usability and lower workload. Cursor position strategy leads to reduced typing performance as the perceived movement and the actual movement is not consistent. When using position-based text entry method, keyboard position, key space, and cursor position strategies are effective in protecting text security as well. Keyboard position consistently surpasses random layout in text entry performance, exhibiting higher usability and reduced workload. It can be seen that when employing the keyboard position and key space strategy, the text entry performance of ring-based and position-based text entry method is different. The main reason is that the special requirement of the two text entry method is different. The above is the share of our work. Thanks for your listening. For more details, please refer to our paper.
Right, let's thank the speakers. We have time for a couple of questions. The senior author is here in the room to answer and help us answer any questions. Are there any questions from the audience?
Hai-Ning, hello, Jens Grubert from Coburg University. Thanks for that interesting take on secure password entry. I think you showed that your technique outperforms random shuffling, basically, of keys, which is a good thing, but still is, let's say, substantially slower than standard entry methods.
That's right.
Do you have an idea how you could adapt or change your methods to also allow for, let's say, friction-free, frustration-free text entry of longer sequences? Is that something that you consider? I think for short sequences it might not matter if you do it at 10 words per minute or 15 or 20, but I guess if you do it a little longer, then this might become an issue, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, James. Unfortunately, my student, it's a bit difficult for her to answer because of the sound issue. There are two answers to this question, of course. One is about how long the users use the techniques. In this case, they use a very short period of time. So I think if they, let's say, for example, use it for a longer period of time, very likely the performance can increase. That's one. For this particular project, we did not, like you said, explore normal text entry. We only explore short phrases for password. Now, one of the things that we did for a different study is to change small things, not so large things. Okay. So, for example, for a different study, we changed the direction of the cursor slightly. Okay. That small adjustment was easier than, for example, making more drastic changes. In that particular study, we found that actually the text entry speed is comparable to the normal standard keyboard without any modifications. At the same time, the security became higher because it was more difficult to guess which keys the users were trying to type. Yeah, very good question. Thank you.
We have time for one additional short question, if there's a question from the audience, another question from the audience. If not, I actually have a question, a very quick one. And that's, I wonder about this disruptiveness of the keyboard moving around abruptly in the space. Did you notice any simulator sickness or any sort of qualitative indication in the results that people were sort of, distracted by that?
I don't believe we measure cyber sickness, but that's a good point. And so after this project, we realized that drastic changes can be a bit disruptive. So we, in a different study, we tried to find mechanisms that minimize these changes. And we found that was slightly better in terms of usability. But that is a different paper. Yeah, that's a good question.
Right, thank you very much. Let's thank the authors. And our next presentation, the title is Text Entry Performance and Situational Awareness of a Joint Optical See-Through Head-Mounted Display and Smartphone System. And it's one of these TVCG invited journal papers. And it's by Jens Grubert, Lukas Witzani, Alexander Otte, Travis Gesslein, Matthias Kranz, and Kristensson, also known as myself. And Jens is giving the presentation. All right.
All right, Paola, thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for making that to the session. I'm Jens Grubert from Coburg University of Applied Sciences, and I'm presenting that paper on behalf of my co-authors. So you might have seen situations like this before, or if you're unlucky, even experienced them on your own. People running or falling into things while typing on their smartphone. So this happens every now and then. There are also, besides distraction, other problems with text entry on smartphones and other devices, like, for example, occlusion issues when you want to enter text and you have such a so-called fat finger problem, it's hard for you to actually acquire a target, which then in turn can also contribute to low and also error-prone text entry. And in contrast, at least for now, head-mounted displays, headsets also still suffer from suboptimal text entry methods. I mean, we are here in that session to see how we can speed that up. Albeit there's great progress, and we also saw that in Benko's keynote, for example, yesterday. So over the last decade, there have been numerous proposals to combine the advantages of smartphones and AR and VR headsets, the complementary strengths of these devices, to enhance interaction. For example, in 2015, my younger me proposed to combine text input on smartphones with text output on augmented reality headsets, specifically on optical see-through headsets. And if you think about it, there are several potential benefits of such joint smartphone optical see-through headset interaction. Just to name you two, there are more, but just to name you two. First of all, it could contribute to faster text entry by enlarging the key sizes, for example, to a full-screen keyboard, and at the same time serve as efficient input medium for the headset. And second, at least that is the hope for now, it could also provide users with better situation awareness and reduce smartphone-induced pedestrian accidents, just like we saw in the video in the beginning. But now the question is if such theoretical benefits actually can materialize. Well, nice idea, does it work? To this end, we ran a series of 5 user studies with a total of 68 participants. And forgive me that, at least in the interest of time, I will not go through every detail of each of these 5 studies. I will just focus on selected details of some of those studies. So in the first 2 studies, we actually looked at text entry performance, okay, either on a subsystem or on the joint system together. And in the subsequent 3 studies, we actually investigated if benefits beyond pure text entry in terms of situation awareness could actually materialize. Or in other words, we really tried hard to find and quantify benefits of such a joint system in the context of text entry. Believe me, we tried hard for several years. But I hate to hold back the gist of results just for the sake of keeping you attending until the very end. So just to give you a brief glimpse if these benefits materialize, and I would say the short answer is no. Well, at least not yet, okay? But, I mean, I don't want to end the talk at this moment and go home in a bad mood or in a sad mood, so the good news first, okay? Let's look at that one by one and unfold it. So we looked at here at the first experiment, actually at the just performance of text entry on the keyboard itself. So while prior studies actually already said, yes, larger keyboards help to increase text entry speed, this is known, we saw it as crucial to quantify the effects at the particular operating point of the smartphone that we are using in our context to see how that works. And to this end, we actually compare text entry on a standard keyboard with a full-screen keyboard here. And as you can see, the text output was redirected to an external monitor to exclude that as a confounding factor. Okay, we used the mobile phrase set from Witzani and Kristensson as input, and most of our conditions, they lasted around 15 minutes for all our studies, by the way. Okay. So, and I just want to look at a key metric here, which is text entry performance in terms of words per minute. And as you can see, yay, actually, as expected, a full-screen keyboard leads to higher text entry rates, significantly so. All good, okay? So, great. The next step then is to see if that actually translates into that joint system. So you have a smartphone in your hand, and you wear a headset, and then you redirect the text output to that headset. And to this end, we actually compared now 3 different interfaces. So baseline, again, just input, output on the smartphone itself, just as you do it always. A second interface was HUD, head-up display style version where you had the text output on an optical see-through display, the Epson BT300 in that case, and it was not spatially registered. So you could float it around and always had it in front of you. And the last version was an augmented reality version with a spatially registered text output field just on top of that smartphone. Okay? And we we had a 1x3 within subjects design here with these conditions, 15 minutes each, looked at objective data, words per minute, character entry rate, and also some subjective data. And let's dive right into the results, okay? So what did we do? First of all, we found out, both conditions, both HMD conditions, HUD and AR actually performed significantly worse in terms of text entry, right? HUD 10% slower text entry rates, AR 21% slower text entry rates, 2 times and 3 times higher character errors, albeit on a rather low absolute level. And this was also reflected in the subjective ratings of the NASA TLX overall score and the simulator thickness total severity measure, which indicated that the spatially registered AR version resulted in significantly worse ratings. We have some nice quotes from our participants on that as well. I invite you to look at the paper. Yeah, also finally, if you look at the preferences and comments, this was also actually indicated here. Yeah, 5 participants explicitly preferred HUD over augmented reality because they said, well, it's actually always visible, right? I don't need to tilt my head down to my smartphone to see the text output. All right, well, at least now we know text entry isn't the thing to go with those systems, but maybe we can unravel some other benefits. So also, I need to let you know that this experiment happened in a stationary context, so we hypothesized that maybe in dynamic contexts, such as walking, at least the situational awareness aspects might come out a little bit better. So to this end, we actually run 3 more experiments, one in a physical obstacle course, one in a virtual obstacle course, and another one in a virtual obstacle course. And again, in interest of time, I will only look at a single one of them right now. So here, what we did is we actually asked participants to walk along a virtual boardwalk to enter text as fast and accurate as they could, and at the same time to react to virtual pillars or virtual obstacles coming along them. And they needed to do so by pressing a button on the back of their smartphones, okay? And it turns green when they detected it in time, it turned red if they basically virtually ran into it. And that's a hard task, so I can tell you that. Okay? Again, we compared the baseline condition of our experiment before, now with only the HUD version because AR didn't really cut it, so we just removed that condition. We added some more objective and subjective data. Specifically, we also looked at obstacle collisions and eye gaze and head tilt to quantify where people actually looked. Okay? And again, text entry rate was not of primary interest here. We also didn't find significant differences here. But we could see that if you're wearing a head-mounted display redirects the text output, you actually look less on the smartphone, which is naturally because you have to look into your head-mounted display, but that could actually also induce your hope that you can look in your environment and ideally see more of that environment. So approximately 40% of the time in the baseline condition was being seen here in the baseline condition. Around 40% of the time they looked on the smartphone, and in the HUD condition only 25% of the time. But now, does it actually translate into less collisions? Well, unfortunately, no. In fact, using equivalence testing, we could show that the number of collisions was equivalent between both conditions. So it didn't help at all. It didn't help at all. Okay? In addition, we also did not find any significant differences in terms of the situational awareness ratings. So, yeah, bad news. So to summarize, while our experiments indicated that optimizing a subsystem of that joint headset smartphone space actually can improve performance, this actually does not translate to that joint performance, okay? Because the, let's say, costs of that head-mounted display just outweighed the benefits of a larger keyboard. It's as simple as that. And also why we could indicate that users indeed looked less on the smartphone in our virtual obstacle course, it also didn't help. So, sorry for the bad news. I hope we can do better in the future. I have some ideas about what we can do. Please come to talk to me. And I thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jens, for this detective story presentation, unraveling the mystery. So, do we have any questions from the audience? We have time for a couple of questions. Okay, let's go here first.
Thanks, Jens. I'm John Dudley at University of Cambridge. I was just going to ask, well, I think you're alluding to other things you might explore. I'm just wondering about the presentation of, like, you still have very small sort of visual windows for presenting the text field. Is that something that you think might have had an impact changing that?
No. So so this was this is true that you have a relatively small font size, at least it appears in the video, but it was never, let's say, unraveled during the experiments in, let's say, pilot studies during the design phase that this would be an issue. You could, of course, still ask and hypothesize if I'm increasing the font size by 2 or 3 times, will that improve? But my suspicion is it will not change a thing, okay? And I can also, actually, let me quickly show that video. It has something to do with where the information is presented. Today's optical see-through head-mounted displays unfortunately have their system, the information presented in a certain focal distance, approximately 2 meters in front of us, and this is not where your smartphone is, this is not where the environment is, so you need to refocus all the time, and this alone has a major impact, much, much higher than any other system factor that I can imagine.
Thanks, Jen, for the good presentation. Related to that question, one of the things that we found with like see-through head-mounted displays is that the brightness of the environment can affect what you perceive. And oftentimes, users have to adjust frequently when they look at, when they change viewpoints. So, for example, if I look at the see-through here, and then have to go down and up, they have to constantly adjust their focus. Do you see that as an issue for this particular case?
So the focus issue, this is what this video should indicate. So these are 2 different focal distances, right? This is for sure, this is a very, very, very real and major factor. Brightness is another one. Actually here, the situation is much worse. That's shown on the video. You can test it out with yourself. If you put your thumb above and then refocus back and forth, there's also diplopia, double vision coming into play. And if you need to constantly refocus between these 2 depth planes, you're getting nuts, basically. We also quantified that in another paper, in a perception psychology experiment. And I think this translates also beyond text entry for every task that where you actually have real-world data within arm's reach, real-world information, and additional data on your head-mounted display. It's actually, the problem is generalizing beyond that specific text entry problem.
Any other questions from the audience or a follow-up question?
Hey, and great presentation. My question is mostly relevant to the situational awareness, like they are pressing the keyboard. Have you ever thought like what will happen if they give the text entry with a voice and they walk? Did they anything, I mean, I'm just curious, like what's your thought? Maybe I'm not thinking from the performance side, I'm thinking from the situational awareness side. Instead of a keyboard, if they have a HUD and they put the input with a voice, What do you think about it?
I mean, it will. First of all, we didn't study voice input. That's sure. Voice input has, let's say, other limitations. But let's just think that through for a moment. Yeah? If voice would be acceptable, let's just assume that. Then probably it would get a little bit better, but not by much, because again, you still, if you assume that you still look at your text, if you only use voice input, you don't need an AR glass in the first place. You just need a microphone. But if you want to actually see what you wrote, you still have that refocusing issue. It will not be such a big problem because, let's say, the versions and accommodation changes that need to happen between your midfield and the far field are less of a concern than between midfield and near field, but it still will be an issue. So maybe you will only run into every second lamppost or so.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And let's thank the speaker again. The next presentation is efficient mid-air text input correction in virtual reality. And the authors are John Dudley, Amy Karlson, Kashyap Todi, Benko, Matt Longest, Robert Wang, and Per-Ola Kristensson, again known as myself as well.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, I'm here today to talk about our paper on efficient mid-air text input correction, and I'm very happy to be presenting on behalf of my co-authors at University of Cambridge and Meta Reality Labs Research. So if you attended the keynote on Tuesday, you might have seen some of our work in collaboration with Meta looking at text entry in VR space. And then last year we actually presented this paper at ISMAR, just demonstrating a sort of flexible and efficient mid-air text entry method for use in VR. And this paper examined both text entry via touching on virtual touching on a keyboard and gesture typing, and demonstrated pretty effective entry rates. So you can see here that was 52 words per minute, well, obviously just a single example. But one thing that I guess we identified, and I'm sure you can imagine, is that even though you provide a good error-tolerant text entry method that's flexible, people still make mistakes, right? So to err is human. And so I guess one thing that we wanted to explore from this is how can we make the error correction part more efficient. So looking at the data that we captured in the previous paper, this is a brief summary of the errors committed by participants in the previous study for the previous ISMAR paper. So one thing to highlight here is that when people committed errors, when they needed to correct an error, so they used the backspace key or whatever to correct an error, then they were about 24% slower when they were doing the touch typing method, and about 30% slower when they were doing gesture typing. So there's this quite large penalty and frustration associated with correcting errors just by using, say, the backspace key. That was the only method that we supported for providing error correction in the previous study. And then if we look in a bit more detail at the sort of characteristics of the errors that people committed, we didn't require them to fix all the errors, so certainly people still did commit errors. They didn't notice a mistake that they had made, for example. Then if we look at the word edit distance, so for a phrase of, say, 6 words, how many words in that phrase were incorrect? For the most part, people didn't make errors, so there's a lot of density there in the 0. But after that, the vast majority were just sort of one edit distance away, so there was only one word that was incorrect in the phrase. Then if we look at for those words where there was just one word off, the vast majority of those were substitution errors, which means that it was just the wrong word. It wasn't that they'd added a word or they'd missed a word. It was mostly just substitution errors. And then if we look at within those substitution errors, the vast majority of those errors involved only 1 or 2 character errors. So their word was wrong, but it was only 1 or 2 characters off. And so what that hinted to us was that there's likely to be sort of a word level based edit correction method, because although we didn't get the exact word, it's likely we can predict, because it's so similar to the desired word, what it was likely to be. And so that led us to focus on a word level strategy for editing for edit correction, which I'll talk a bit more in a moment. So there obviously has been some prior work in text correction, obviously, and a lot of work in the desktop space, entering on a physical keyboard, more recent work on text entry on a smartphone, but actually very little work on specifically focusing on mid-air text correction. So there's been some efforts by Keith Hrvoje and his students looking at correction using direct interaction with this word confusion network on the bottom left, and then some work looking at how you can support people better to move the caret around, not specifically focused on the whole task of correcting errors, but looking at just how you position the caret to maybe make subsequent errors. So we really wanted to sort of deep dive into not just supporting caret movement, but looking at how you can make this whole task of correcting identified errors more efficient. So to give some structure to the exploration in this investigation, we decomposed this task of text correction into these three main key functions that you need to support. So you need to be able to indicate where an error is in a phrase, like which word in the phrase is incorrect. Then you need to perform some sort of action to actually tell what the correction should be to change it into the correct form. And then you may, in a lot of cases, need to then confirm that change so that it gets inserted into the input field. So this gave us a structure for then thinking about how we could lay out different interaction methods that achieve these various functions. And just to point out that there's not always a clear delineation between functions. So for example, we still explored the caret-based method, where the user has to touch and move a caret within the text input field and then interact with the keyboard. So there's no strictly separation between the edit subtask there and the confirm subtask. I've got videos of each of these, so I'll show that in a moment, but just to highlight that we were very interested in exploring the modern capabilities of the latest iteration of head-mounted displays. So we were very interested in looking at hand-based interaction with tracked hands, the raycast being the other main form of interaction supported with hand-based interaction in VR, then gaze and indirect-based methods that's sort of loosely based on this idea that, again, you may recall from the presentation on Tuesday, if you imagine a control via sort of a wrist or a wristband or some sort of input device that isn't necessarily allowing you to track your full hand position. Okay, so here's a video demonstration of the caret-based interaction. So you can see this is quite a simple port of the kind of experience you would have on a smartphone. So you can touch directly on the input field, drag the caret to the position, and then interact with the keyboard to make any corrections. So this, just to make it clear, the sentence here is what you're trying to make the sentence into, and then the sentence below that the user interacted with had some errors in it that they needed to correct. So the same sentence here, but with touch-based interaction. So the user can directly touch on the word, and then this presents this sort of mini context menu that contains potential alternatives. So all of these alternatives are derived from this sort of word confusion network. So the original presses that the person put on the keyboard is used to generate what the alternatives might be presented here. Okay, and then raycast method, again, similar interaction, but now the user's using their raycast to focus on the word. They pinch to indicate that that's the word they want to edit. Then they pinch again once they've selected the word they want to replace, and that confirms the insertion into the input field. So here's an indication. Here's a video of the gaze-based interaction method. So you can see, hopefully you can see this light gray cursor here that's moving around. That's the gaze focus point. So in this case, we were using the MetaQuest Pro, which provides gaze, and so the user's able to position their gaze on the word, pinch to bring up the menu, and then they look at the word they want to replace, and they pinch again to confirm the insertion. And then here's the indirect method, which as I mentioned, is sort of trying to replicate this idea of a alternate peripheral that maybe doesn't have as precise control as direct hand-based interaction. So to mimic that, the interaction we supported here was that the user has to flip over their hand, and from that point, they control this cursor, but only in relative terms, so they move their hand left to move that cursor and so on. And so again, otherwise the interaction's the same, so they move this cursor to position onto the word. Okay, so for the evaluation we ran in this study, in this paper, this is the interface that participants saw. So their task was explained in the top field, this sort of roughly mimicking the layout of like a messenger type application on a VR headset. The stimulus that they had to either type out or correct the erroneous text into that form, shown just above. The text field is shown here in this sort of dark gray, and then they are presented with a keyboard, and that's they can interact with the keyboard to make any corrections as well. So to give some resolution to our understanding of the efficiency of these different interaction methods in different settings, we asked participants to perform 2 tasks. So they performed what we called a review correction task, where they were presented with sentences that contained errors and asked to correct it into the correct form. And then they also performed a live correction or input correction task, where they had to both enter the phrase, and if they made any mistakes, then make corrections. So in terms of the protocol, there were the 5 different conditions representing the 5 different interaction methods. Within each condition, they performed both tasks sequentially before moving to the next condition. And the order of these conditions was obviously balanced to control for learning effects and transfer and so on. So we had 20 participants with the demographics described there. The whole study took about an hour and a half. A distribution of different levels of prior experience with virtual reality, and participants were compensated for their time. So to dive quickly into the results, so for the review correction task here, the participants are just being asked to correct any mistakes that occur in the sentence. And I should have said that within each of these tasks, there were 10 different phrases. So in this case, they had to correct 10 sentences per condition, and there were an increasing number of errors in each of the sentences as they went through those 10. So starting from 1 for the first 6 or 7, and then there were 2 errors, and then 3 in the last sentence that they had to correct. So here you see the mean correction time per error, so that's sort of normalizing for how many errors exist in the sentence. And we saw a significant effect associated with the conditions, with the touch being faster than caret, also faster than indirect, but no significant difference between touch and raycast or touch and gaze. Here for input correction, a sort of slightly different story. So in this case, the most efficient method was caret, or significantly faster than gaze and indirect, not different from touch and raycast. And on the right-hand side here, you can see that actually in a lot of cases, people were able to write the sentence without needing to use the error correction, and even then they could use the backspace key to perform correction instead of the interaction method. So this is actually how many times they used each of these in specific interactions to perform that corrective task. So usually it was less than half of the phrases that they had typed out. Just briefly looking at participant preferences. So touch was the sort of stood out in terms of efficiency and accuracy and comfort. But interestingly, in terms of the overall preferences, actually, there was an even split in terms of overall preference between the touch-based method and the gaze-based method. And the other point to that, I guess, is that, as I mentioned here, for the input correction, where caret was the most efficient, that was the most preferred method for input correction tasks. So when they were actually entering the text and having to correct as they made mistakes, then they much preferred the caret-based interaction method. So here's some qualitative feedback that sort of tries to tease some of that out. So I guess one of the key standout themes that emerged was that the caret-based method is very familiar, so it's something that people are very accustomed to from use of the smartphone. So when they're also trying to do this quite unfamiliar task of inputting text in virtual reality, it's nice to be able to sort of leverage this familiar correction method. And why did people still like gaze-based methods, despite it maybe not being as performant? People commented about how it was sort of a very, it didn't involve a lot of physical effort to complete, and they felt like it was sort of a very natural interaction. So just quickly in terms of conclusions, hopefully I've highlighted that input, or I'm sure you're already aware that input correction is a frustrating and time-consuming part of text entry, and certainly in VR, where it's perhaps more error-tolerant, this is even more frustrating. Our analysis suggested that a word-level strategy would be effective, and certainly for the review editing task, that sort of bore out. So that's just making that point. But for the caret-based method, that was something that still people seem to really rely on and perform well in for when they were actually inputting the text as well. And I guess there's some early indication that a gaze-based method might be complementary for word-level editing. And that's something that will be exciting to look further. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have time for 1 or 2 short questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. A quick question was, are there any preferences that were noted in terms of feedback by participants where they would like to have access to more than one way of correction at a character or a word level?
Yeah, so I guess I didn't mean to imply that sort of you'd only support one of these methods. So certainly on a smartphone, right, you can touch a word and replace it by, pressing the button or use the caret. I think, for the purpose of it, like running an experiment, we made them very independent. But yeah, I would definitely think that like a caret-based method, in addition to some other word-level-based method, would make sense.
And was that ever disclosed by any of the participants?
Well, we didn't really ask questions about it specifically, but I think it would make sense to do that, yeah.
Hello, I'm Jens Grubert from Coburg University. John, thank you so much for that interesting talk. I noticed that in your design, your text output field was, of course, at a specific position and orientation. Maybe related to the question before, do you have any ideas or indications of how the performance of your methods might or might not substantially change when you change that spatial layout of the text output field? For example, laying it on top of your table because you're looking below and you're busy with your task on a table surface. Do you have any indications of that or any comments?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's, for say the touch-based methods where you're having to reach out, moving it would certainly make a difference, right, in terms of the effort involved. For the gaze-based method, I imagine it would also make quite a significant difference. So having it at a nice viewing angle that's easy to differentiate between words based on the gaze is quite important for a gaze-based method. So I suspect if you sort of tried to skew that by flattening it out, that would maybe not perform as well, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's thank the speaker once again. And our next paper is called Accented Character Entry Using Physical Keyboards in Virtual Reality, and it's a conference paper. And the first author is Snehanjali Kalamkar, who's given the presentation. Other authors include Verena Biener, Daniel Pauls, Leon Lindlein, Morteza Izzadifar, Parola Kristensson, again known as myself as well, and Jens Grubert. All right, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So hello everyone, I am Snehanjali Kalamkar, a PhD student from Coburg University, and today I will present to you our work on accented character entry using physical keyboards in virtual reality. So text entry in virtual reality is widely investigated with different techniques like bringing physical keyboards in VR, using VR controllers, or using gaze. And most of these efforts have been directed towards general text entry. However, a text entry challenge which has received limited attention even outside of VR is accented character entry. And let's see what accented characters are. So accented characters are characters where a glyph is added to a letter, for example, an acute, an overdot, or a grave, and more. They help us to pronounce the words correctly. For example, the word resume without the diacritical marks could get confused with the verb resume. And in fact, when diacritical marks exist in nouns in a person's name, writing the name without them might be disrespectful to the person. And sometimes people having the names with accented characters even adapt their names to English versions to ease the process of entering their names in locations like hospitals, government offices, etc. and hence there is a need to ease the process of entering accented characters. If you happen to use a soft keyboard, for example, on a phone, and just as I found out yesterday on a MacBook, it is easy to enter an accented character just by long pressing on a related letter, and the suggestions of the accented characters appear and can be selected easily. But this does not happen out of the box on a physical keyboard, as either there are no dedicated keys for these accented characters, or there are keys limited to the respective language. But the benefits of VR, like being able to change the visual representation and input-output mappings of the keyboard, can help solve this problem. For example, in prior work by Wang et al., they evaluated efficient text entry techniques in VR for alphanumeric and special characters like semicolon, comma, etc., where the content of the keys was changed on pointing at them. Schneider et al. Proposed reconfiguring the keyboard by overlaying keys of a base character, here A, on pressing the modifier key. However, this technique was not evaluated. So inspired by this prior work and existing techniques, we designed 3 techniques on how to enter accented character in VR using a physical keyboard. So the first is baseline, which is based on the existing technique from Microsoft Windows, reconfiguration based on the prior work by Schneider et al., and a multimodal technique using keyboard interaction combined with eye tracking for accented character entry in VR. In Windows, one way to enter accented characters is to keep Alt pressed, enter a 3-digit numeric code, release Alt to enter the required character. The user, however, must either remember the code or look it up. For VR, we enhance this process by making it context aware. That is, the users need not recall the code, but instead they are shown the codes related to the base key when it is pressed along with the modifier key. For example, to enter the accented character A with a tilde from the word shown on the virtual screen, the user presses the modifier key Alt and the base character A that is related to the desired character. This displays the corresponding codes of all accented characters related to the base character A on the virtual monitor. While still holding Alt, the user then enters the respective 3-digit code here, which is 198, and releases Alt to confirm the entry, and the accented character with A with a tilde is added to the text. In the reconfiguration technique, we followed the original idea of using Alt key to modify key mappings relative to the base key and highlighting the accented characters with a different color. But instead of placing them on neighboring keys, we positioned the accented characters 1 row above the base key, inspired by current-day smartphones. For example, the modifier key Alt and the base character O is pressed as O with the 2 overdots has to be typed. The keys 1 row above O will overlay to show different accents related to O. Now the overlaid key showing the desired accent can be pressed to add it to the text. The next is multimodal technique, and here, although gaze-based text entry techniques have been studied before, but combining eye gaze with physical keyboard input remain underexplored. So hence, in this multimodal technique, we combine keyboard input with eye tracking. While holding down the modifier key Alt and pressing the desired base key, a list of square buttons is displayed on the virtual screen. And on pressing the desired character can be targeted by eye gaze, indicated in blue, and can be entered by pressing the base key again, indicated in green. For example, to enter A with the overring here, while holding Alt, the user presses the base key A, and this displays the accented characters related to A side by side on the virtual screen. The user can then target the desired character via eye gaze, which is now indicated in blue, A with the overring, and upon pressing the base key A again, the desired character flashes green and gets added to the text. For our prototype, we used Unity game engine, MetaQuest Pro, which offers both built-in hand and eye tracking, and we use a Logitech MX Keys as keyboard for text entry, which has a numpad, and it is compatible with the MetaQuest Pro. In our experiment, the typing task was slightly unconventional. We chose accented characters from French, Turkish, Danish, and German that were related to English vowels. And as the accented characters came from these different languages, instead of sentences as stimuli, we used words. For our experiment's word corpus, we scraped human first names from Wikipedia and city names from Open Datasoft dataset, and we filtered for words containing the chosen accented characters and limited the length to 5 to 8 characters to minimize word length variation. The participants were then shown these words one by one on a virtual screen and instructed to type them as quickly as possible. Our experiment was conducted as a 1x3 within subject's design, and the independent variable was technique, which could be baseline, reconfiguration, and multimodal. For objective data, we collected text entry rate in words per minute and the character error rate for overall text, only for accented characters and regular characters. For the subjective data, we collected questionnaire data from system usability scale, NASA task load index, and simulator sickness. After all the conditions, the participants filled out a preference questionnaire and an interview about their likes and dislikes in each technique. Coming to the statistically significant results, we found that reconfiguration resulted in 33.6% higher and multimodal 25.2% higher overall text entry rate compared to baseline. The entry rate for accented characters specifically was 72.7% higher in reconfiguration and 76.4% higher in multimodal. The usability of reconfiguration was found to be 42% higher than baseline, and we did not find any significant difference in baseline and multimodal here. The final preference questionnaire revealed that 11.2% of the participants preferred baseline techniques, citing it as fun and interesting, easy to use. However, others noted it disrupted their touch typing as they had to switch to the numpad for accented character entry, and this broke their typing flow. 44.4% preferred reconfiguration, finding it easy to use, adaptable, natural, though some mentioned frequent head movements when typing accented characters. Another 44.4% preferred the multimodal approach, describing it as fun and intuitive with less head movement, since accented characters were displayed on the screen. And however, some participants found it tiring because they had to focus more, and this was a bit loading. And among our sample set, 7 of the participants reported having low touch typing experience and looked at the keyboard often while typing. And they preferred reconfiguration as the characters were shown on the keyboard. The remaining 11 reported moderate touch typing experience and looked at the keyboard relatively less. Them, in contrast, favored the multimodal approach because the accented characters were at eye level and this reduced their head movement while typing. And leveraging the strengths of VR, we can customize the system to better suit different typing styles. For touch typists, eye gaze-based selection can be positioned closer to the keyboard. For touch typists, a virtual copy of the keyboard can be displayed near the screen, allowing for easier selection and reduced head movement. Hence, to conclude in this work, we investigated 3 techniques: baseline, a context-aware numeric code technique, reconfiguration, where accented characters are dynamically remapped to physical keys near the base character, and multimodal, where keyboard input is combined with eye gaze to select accented version of the base character. And our results show that both reconfiguration and multimodal outperformed the baseline in terms of text entry speed and were preferred by participants. And additionally, reconfiguration demonstrated higher usability than the baseline. Thus, with the capabilities of VR, such as eye tracking and adaptable keyboard layouts, we can enhance the efficiency of accented character entry. We were inspired by Microsoft Windows technique for accented character entry and only focused on evaluating a similar yet context-aware method in our experiment. Other techniques, like using the compose key technique in Windows from compose key technique from Linux and using alt group to combine keys for accented character entry could still be investigated. From the user feedback, we learned that reconfiguration could be rather easy to learn. However, multimodal technique might take longer to learn, as for most people, eye tracking input is still a new kind of interaction technique. So in future, long-term studies should be conducted to understand the learning curve of each technique, and also the prolonged effect of using eye tracking interfaces should still be investigated. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer your questions now.
Thank you for that great presentation. I just want to mention that the reconfiguration condition was inspired by the reconfiguration paper, which was actually published at ISMAR in, I think, 2019. I got a Best Paper Award, right?
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any questions for the audience?
Thank you very much for the presentation. I took a few things away from your paper. One thing I was going to mention is about the technique with multimodality. So I was wondering why you did not maybe consider, because since you are gazing that character, just do something very simple, like eye blink, to do the selection instead of having to press the key again, because that involves a one step further in terms of thinking and also reaction and action.
I think it could be interesting, but I feel like it could induce a character entry by mistake. I mean, we looked at a similar technique like using hover, and we observed that over and over that in our initial when we were testing our techniques, we found that with hover, already people had some problems while typing, and I think something like that could happen with a blink too, like erroneous inputs. Thank you.
Is there a question from the online people? No. No online people. Any other questions from the audience? We have time for another question.
Thank you very much for the great talk. I guess if you're familiar with entering accented characters, I guess you might be very familiar with using the Microsoft-based approach, right? Did you think about looking at how, or did you look at how people who enter accented characters regularly perform compared to people who don't, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you for the question. We did not actually, in our demographic questionnaire also, we did not ask if they usually type or how they type. We had participants from different countries who typed using their own keyboards, actually, related to their own language. For example, from Persian people who type using their own keyboards. But they have their specific keyboard layout. And as far as I can recall, we did not have participants who use other techniques for typing these characters. In fact, actually, me and also I found from some more people, when they have to enter such accented characters, they actually need to Google for that character, they copy it, and they paste it in the text when they need it, which is very inconvenient, I believe.
All right, thank you very much. This is the end of the session. Let's thank the speaker again. Thank you for a great session on text entry, all the authors and presenters, and sorry for running over by 5 minutes. Please enjoy the break.